In the spirit of crew, not passengers, I want to do things a little bit differently tonight than we've done in the past. I've asked tonight's honorees to join me on stage to talk about education in New York City and how schools like mine and students like me are transforming schools and changing lives. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Diana DiMenna. Diana, along with her husband, Joe DiMenna, are the 2018 Educational Leadership Award honorees. Unfortunately, Joe is unable to make it this evening due to illness. I'd also like to welcome New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, our 2018 Expeditioners Award honoree. Finally, I'd like to welcome Robert Reyes, NYC Outward Bound Schools teacher at the James Baldwin School and the 2018 R. Gaynor McCown Excellence in Teaching Award recipient. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. On behalf of all of my fellow students and I, thank you, and I'm honored to share the stage with a group of people that have contributed so much to New York City public schools. So I'd like to jump right in. My first question is for Diana DiMenna. As a parent of 2 young daughters, what resonates most for you about NYC Outward Bound schools?
That's a great question. There are so many people in this room I know through my daughters and through their education. I'm looking at friends we've known since they were in preschool and friends who are kind of in the pre-college process with us. And so it's given me an opportunity to think a lot about our kids and education. And what I think is most astounding about New York City Outward Bound schools is that not every kid is going to go to a magnet school, a charter school, a private school. In fact, the majority of our kids don't, right? Across the country and certainly in New York City. And unless or until we have some kind of drastic reform in terms of the way our public schools serve their constituents who are children, it really is about taking the resources of the private sector and meeting public schools where they are, right? So as I think about children's education in general, a quality education is the birthright of every American child. And thank you. And we're not there. We are not there, and we're not delivering that. And there are, bigger issues that are far beyond me to solve, way above my pay grade. But I think that the reason that we're all in the room is because we understand that as a community, and New York City is one giant community, those kids still have that right, and how they get it may be a kind of a combination of factors, right? So I think what I think about when I think about children's education in general is that programs that meet these New York City public schools where they are with the resources they have and those kids are successful anyway, that's really what we need to be delivering across the board to everybody's kids.
Thank you so much for that answer. It's really great to have a parent perspective here tonight. Teacher perspective here tonight as well. So Mr. Reyes, you are an English teacher at the James Baldwin School, which is an NYC Outward Bound school in Manhattan. You could teach anywhere. Why do you teach at an NYC Outward Bound school?
So I actually have to tell the story of how I first became connected to an NYC Outward Bound school, and it's kind of a funny story. So it started at one of those New York City teacher fairs, and any teacher in the room can tell you that those fairs are kind of ridiculous. It's true. There's like 100 schools and thousands of teachers sort of trying to find a match. But as fate would have it, I was lucky enough to find a table for the James Baldwin School. And I kid you not, I remember exactly what I saw. And I saw an NYC Outward Bound newsletter that had two photos. And the first photo was of our founding principal, and he was in a classroom. And I really do, I remember his look, and his look was intense, like he was intently listening to the young people in that classroom. The second photo was of young people with hiking gear on, and they were climbing perhaps to a peak. And I think something immediately resonated in me. And looking back, I think what resonated is that I too was that New York City student, and I remember in middle school having an educational outward bound-like experience that totally shifted my paradigm. So fast forward to when I was lucky enough to teach at Baldwin and experience this outward bound journey with young people. And what I was most in awe of is just what students brought back. And what they brought back was a newfound sense of community, a trust in the adults who are with them on that journey, listening to them intently, supporting them. And then with that trust, I felt as a teacher, I was able to challenge students more, that they were more willing to take risk, that their capacity to be challenged had expanded. And I think now I'm just blessed to be at a school where the teachers are committed to that balance of support and having high expectations and demanding a lot of students regardless of where their journey is. And so that's why I became an outward bound teacher, and that's why I remain a teacher at an NYC Outward Bound School.
That's incredible. Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Speaker, I have a question for you. So the chief lesson of NYC Outward Bound Schools is that with the right balance of challenge and support, any individual, regardless of background or circumstance, can achieve more than they thought possible. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Speaker, to reflect on your own experience and share with us an example of how you've brought that lesson to life by achieving more than you thought possible.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be up here with these other honorees, and I am so blown away by you and by Tafura. I'm like a little like starstruck by the valedictorian and Miss Middlebury College. I'm like, I am so honored. So how should I start? I did not grow up in New York City. I grew up about 25 miles north of Boston in a little tiny town called Middleton, Massachusetts, near Salem, Massachusetts. And
Massachusetts in the house.
I am not going to say go Red Sox. I will not say that in this room.
You won't get out
Go
of here
Mets!
alive. Right.
You can't help where you were born. And so I grew up in this little tiny town, and in that tiny town, my mom, who I still speak to every single day, still lives up there, and my mom was my lunch lady in school and cleaned houses on the weekends, and my father was a Pepsi truck driver, and he really struggled with alcoholism and a gambling addiction. And when I got into middle school and high school, I realized that one of the things, I was a good student, but I also realized that I was a really good athlete. And athletics sort of became my salvation in many ways. I was the only sophomore to start on both the offense and defense on the varsity football team. And that team culture and knowing that I was good at sports really gave me a level of equilibrium and some confidence in myself that I think carried over into the classroom in many ways. But my sophomore year in high school, towards the end, I became despondent, clinically depressed, and suicidal because I knew that I was gay, and this was in 1998, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I eventually came out to my guidance counselor at school and then to my biology teacher, and they were both wonderfully supporting and loving, and that gave me the courage to come out to my parents, and they were wonderfully supportive and loving. And I decided about a month after I came out to my parents that I was going to come out at my school. And this was in 1999. It was about 6 months after Matthew Shepard had been murdered in Wyoming, tied to a fence and pistol whipped. Marriage equality didn't exist anywhere, and there were no openly gay students in my school. And so when I came out, I'm not going to give you the whole long story, but the day that it was all choreographed of me to come out, and we'd worked with the principal and my football coach and everyone, I walked into school that day and we sat in homeroom, and the principal's voice comes over the PA system to all 1,500 kids in the school, and they say, all football players, please report to the coach's office during second period. And I had been on the football team for years at that point, and that had never happened before. That wasn't a normal thing that at the beginning of the school day, the principal comes on and says that. And so then everyone started asking me, first period's before second period. So everyone started asking me during first, what's happening with this announcement during second period? I said, don't worry, you'll find out in about an hour. And I ended up coming out to my football team. And when I came out to them, it was sort of silence. 50 guys in my coach's office. And within 5 minutes, all 1,500 kids at Masconomet Regional High School knew that I was gay, and I was the only openly gay student. And I tell that story because the level of acceptance that I received, I'm not sure I would have received in 1999, being the only openly gay student, if I wasn't afforded the privilege of being captain of the football team. I think that afforded me a level of privilege and status in the school that other kids in the school didn't have. And I was almost a failing student before I came out. I went from an AB student to almost failing because I was so depressed. And all of a sudden, I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. And I played my senior year out and openly gay. The Massachusetts Department of Education had a speaking program. I spoke in 30 high schools about my experience. The end of my, I'll finish this in 1 second, I'm sorry. The end of my senior year, I got a call from an organization called GLSEN, and they said, we'd love for you to come and get our annual award at Tufts University. So I brought my parents, I brought my football team, we went into Tufts, I accept the award, and the next day a local newspaper writes, gay football captain comes out. I'd come out a year earlier, but no one had written about it, which was fine. I played, it was great, I had a great experience. And 3 days later, no offense to the person I'm sitting next to at my table, our phone rang at home, and it was the New York Times. And we had, I'm not being serious, we didn't know what the New York Times was. We hadn't heard of the New York Times. I grew up, there were 12 units of public housing in the town that I grew up in, and we lived in one of those 12 units of public housing. I had never been on an airplane, I had never been outside of New England, and they said, we want to come up and do a story on you. They came up, they did a story on my 18th birthday, about a month later, on the front page, A1, Arthur, A1 of the Sunday New York Times. There was a photo of me in my football uniform, and it said, an icon is recast, the coming out of a small town. It was below the fold. The story was below the fold, the photo was below the fold, you know. And I tell you this story because that experience, I took a year off after high school. I traveled the country. I spoke in 40 cities about my experience. I became a gay activist at the age of 18. I became like the gay poster child. Creative Artists Agency became my agents. They were selling my life rights. I had a literary agent. I had a speaking agent. And one day I get a phone call from an organization in New York City called the Hetrick Martin Institute on Astor Place. And they said, come to New York. We want to give you our annual award. And I flew to New York. I was 19. I was supposed to spend a week here. At the end of that week, I said, I want to spend another week in New York. I love New York. And maybe that second week, I said, I'm not leaving New York. I'm staying in New York. I moved to New York 3 months later, spent the summer of 2001 here working on a campaign. And I went off to George Washington University in August of 2001. Hated Washington, D.C. with a passion. Dropped out of school after 3 weeks. Came back to New York. And became Speaker of the City Council. And I tell that story for a particular reason because you asked that question. For me, the nexus of sports, the nexus of confidence building, the nexus of a team environment, the nexus of a loving family, a family that had confidence in me and supported me, is really what opened the door, I think, for me to be honest about my sexual orientation at the age of 16 years old. It's what gave me the confidence to speak around Massachusetts. It's what gave me the confidence to speak around the country. And it's what got me politically active, engaged, and involved. It's what led me to New York City. That moment of feeling suicidal, despondent, and clinically depressed, of fear, of not knowing any gay person, not have ever met a gay person, walking through that fear, not knowing what was going to be on the other side. That moment of grace where the door opened, I walked through the door, really started the chain reaction for kind of all the other doors that opened up along the way. And so for me to hear about your experience and to hear about Tafura's experience and to hear about these amazing numbers, I am so grateful, of course, for you all, but I'm grateful that I had the ability to have the experience I had, which I think set me up for success in the rest of my life.
It's amazing. Wow.
So now you know why he's called the speaker.
Sorry. I apologize.
I have the distinct pleasure of closing.
I love Mean Girls.
Yeah. We all do. I have the distinct pleasure of now turning the tables on our moderator, Anna, and asking her a little bit about your experience, obviously, as an Outward Bound School student, brought you from one place to a very different place, right? Can you talk a little bit about how you plan to bring what you've learned and the changes that being in a supportive environment with the kind of acceptance and scaffolding that you had to your experience in college?
Yes, I can. So in my school, we are really set up to be confident and to be able to stand behind our own work and defend it, while remaining open to the ideas of others and remaining open-minded. So when I do go to college, I will have the confidence to assert myself in the classroom and to know that I'm doing the best job I can. However, I know that if I need extra support or extra resources, I also have the ability to go out and find those to maximize my level of success in college.
Where are you going?
So I have currently committed to Hunter College.
Wow! Selfishly, I'm very glad that we get to keep her very, very close. And if I may, Mr. Reyes, one of the things that strikes me most about the Outward Bound schools is the sort of ethos of academic demand and really character demand, right? That's really what we're talking about. And I think that those of us of a certain generation, there's a shorthand to sort of, hello, bug, to sort of bemoaning this generation of kids, right? It's like the thing we do. We go, oh, we can't hire them, we can't. And so this idea of character, right? There are two things that people are looking for, that sort of grown-ups are looking for in the world now in young people, right? Commitment, character, and a sense of passion for something, right? We can get the best resume in the world, and if that kid doesn't have those things, that's not a whole person. So can you give us just a little bit about how Outward Bound Schools demands really both of those things, right? An academic excellence, but also a real upstanding character. And what does that look like in the classroom on a day-to-day basis?
So, I mean, I'll say first of all that I feel like I'm fortunate, again, to be at a school where I think first at my NYC Outward Bound School, teachers first and adults need to sort of like adjust their lens, because you're right? Like students come with great character, but it's often overlooked. And I think that students have so much potential that maybe adults have overlooked for such a long time, that really it's about shining a light on that student, giving them a stage. Like when I think of one of our students who's here, Heaven Dennis, she came with great character. We just need to stand back in awe a little bit and like watch her magic. So I really think it's on adults, and then it's on us to sort of like also put students in position to build, to collaborate, to learn. I think crew is a place where that certainly happens when students aren't sort of like individual and at a desk, but when they're forced to sort of like problem solve and figure things out together. So I think those moments really help students sort of discover their own potential, which many of them they already had.
Could you bring the crew model to the government? Just asking. just asking. It was an innocent question.
That's hilarious.
So I think that's all the time we have for tonight. So can we have another round of applause for our inspiring honorees?
Thank you.